Today, I want to talk about drugs, because one of the main things that Donald Trump ran on in his 2024 campaign was that undocumented immigrants were poisoning this country with fentanyl. And while I understand that Donald Trump was very, very good at latching onto this and spinning up this rhetoric that resonated with the American people, I'm here to contend that I don't think he gives a shit about fentanyl. But first, if you guys want to support independent progressive media and help me make it to 1,000 subscribers, please remember to hit that subscribe button. I would very much appreciate your support. Now, fentanyl is a major, major issue in this country. In fact, it's one of the main drivers behind the spike in overdose deaths that we've seen over the last few years. But I've got some pretty good news to share. This year, we are seeing quite a decline in overdose deaths. And while it is nowhere near where we would want it to be, in fact, we probably wouldn't want any if it were possible, we are still making progress because of some of the things that the Biden administration has done. So let's go ahead and take a look at what the actual fentanyl crisis is about, and then we will go from there.
After years of relentless rises in overdose deaths, New York Times reports, the United States has seen a remarkable reversal. For 7 straight months, according to federal data, drug fatalities have been declining. The difference is dramatic. It's the largest decrease on record.
Now, this is excellent, excellent news. And while it is still over 100,000 people that are dying due to preventable overdoses, we are making a dent in this problem. And there are a whole bunch of different things that we can accredit to the Biden administration for help tackling this problem. But it is something that nobody really knows about because it seems to be much harder to sell a win than it does to complain about something that is negative. This is what Donald Trump is particularly good at. He can identify all these different problems that a whole bunch of different people have, but he has never proved himself that good at tackling these issues in a substantive way. He's very good at saber-rattling about it, making it be a main driving issue, but when it comes time to fix things, he doesn't seem that effective. So let's go ahead and take a look at Xavier Becerra, I think is the Health and Human Services Secretary, talking about how the Biden administration is trying to actually tackle this problem.
We are beginning to see a drop, I think, because we have, in this administration, we decided to tackle overdose in 3 important ways and then added 1 new one. Obviously, prevention, treatment, and then follow-up care. But we added a 4th component, harm reduction. If you are about to take a drug because you're addicted, and if you can check to find out if it's laced with fentanyl, it might stop you from taking that drug if you find out, oh my God, I didn't realize this drug is laced with fentanyl. Fentanyl strips, which are out there today in many, many programs, the federal government would prohibit programs from getting federal dollars if they provided fentanyl strips. We have said the evidence proves that you can save a life by giving someone a fentanyl strip so they can find out if fentanyl is laced in their drug.
You know, this harm reduction, I've covered multiple iterations of the harm reduction debate. I remember people demagoguing on needle exchanges and things like this during HIV. Fentanyl strips seem to me like an obviously sensible thing. Simple. But has this been a controversial program or not?
On the ground, no, because it's saving lives. At the federal level, because you get into this politic of drugs and so forth, yes, but it's proving itself a winner. And today, more people are living. We've also made naloxone more available to folks so that if you're ODing, somebody finds you there, you can provide them with a drug that will help reverse that overdose.
Yeah, naloxone being a drug that can interrupt and stop an overdose, but has to be given essentially within a few minutes of the actual.
And so now that's available over the counter. That wasn't before, but this administration has made it available so we can save lives.
Now, these are all excellent developments that everybody should know about. Why doesn't anybody know about these things? I will be the first to criticize the Democratic Party for not doing a good job of celebrating their wins, and this would be at the top of the list. the Biden administration has done a number of things to try to make sure that people aren't dying from preventable overdose deaths. Making Narcan more available, so if you do overdose, you have a medicine that can quickly reverse it. Providing other harm reduction measures to make sure that people can test for fentanyl, to make sure they're not going to overdose by accident. These are all excellent things that are saving American lives, but I would venture to say that less than 5 or 10% of the population actually knows that this is going on. People only know about the fentanyl problem because either, one, they have been affected by it personally, or because, two, Donald Trump has been shouting this at the top of his lungs for the last year or two. Again, this comes down to how Donald Trump has been an effective messenger about what the problem is, while Democratic politicians have been not so good messengers about the things they are doing to address the actual issue. And what do we know? Donald Trump has spent a ton of time blaming not only undocumented immigrants, but he spent a lot of time blaming China as well. But the Biden administration has actually worked with China to try to stop the precursor chemicals from being sent over here so it can be turned into fentanyl. But nobody knows about this. Let's go ahead and take a look.
Last year, President Biden had this big bilateral meeting with the Chinese President Xi in California. Don't know if you remember this, but we covered it. He had a live press conference. And the big takeaway from that meeting was that both sides signed on to an agreement on stopping the flow of the chemical precursors that are largely generated in China and used to make fentanyl, to stop the flow from China to Mexico and the U.S. It was a rare area of open cooperation between U.S. and Chinese officials amidst a fraught relationship these days, helping reduce the supply chain of fentanyl in this country.
Again, these are all excellent developments that are saving American lives. How many times have we heard Donald Trump blame China for our fentanyl problem? And while they do play a major role in making some of those chemicals available, Biden is actually doing the work to try to fix this issue. Biden is trying to open up those diplomatic relationships like MAGA always talks about to try to solve the issue. So why is it that nobody knows about this? I think that is a huge, huge problem. And that kind of brings me to my next point, that Democrats are terrible about messaging about their wins. We've already talked about that. But Donald Trump has been such an effective communicator that he makes all of these issues that are very important seem way larger than they probably are. And while Donald Trump spends a whole lot of time complaining and bitching about this problem or that problem and making others care about it, what has he really done, or what plans has he drawn up to actually address this problem? We saw this in his first term. He always promised that we are going to build a wall on the southern border and Mexico is going to pay for it. That never happened. He's promised a whole bunch of different things that he never did anything about. Because Donald Trump is more, he is a better communicator at pointing out the problems, but when it comes to actually getting anything done to solve any of these problems, he doesn't seem to have any care at all. He's more interested in winning elections. He's more interested in pissing off his base so they'll show up and vote for him. I don't think Donald Trump cares one bit about people dying from fentanyl. In fact, if we look at this next piece, actually, we'll look at a graph here in a second where we can see that the fentanyl has been on the rise for quite some time, even under the Trump administration, but there is no real decline in those overdose deaths during the Trump administration. But I think what is important to gather from all this is that it is so much harder to solve these problems than it is to complain about them. And it's even harder to get Americans to care about the actual work that is being done, because it's not something that's, you're snapping your fingers and the problem is solved. That is just not how the world works. It's harder to sell your wins because it's normally little incremental changes at a time. And so maybe Americans just either don't want to take the time to celebrate those wins. Maybe the changes aren't big enough, so they don't think they are worthy of celebration. I don't know what exactly it is. But I think it is important to point out that it is much harder to solve problems than it is to complain about them. Let's go ahead and take a look at this next bit.
But all these policies combined, the harm reduction, the increased treatment, the test strips, the attacking the precursor chemicals, it seems to be working. They're having an effect. The fact that this is working is, I would contend, a story that almost no one in America knows. Wasn't part of the Democratic campaign. And it's a good reminder of a sort of hard, well-worn truth. Building things and fixing things is a lot more difficult than breaking them. Solving difficult problems like an overdose epidemic requires a bunch of people coordinating their efforts, and the doing of that work, of governing, is much, much harder than populist posturing about the problems.
And this kind of brings me to my next point, because I cannot tell you how many times I've heard that the Democrats need to go populist, we need the populist left, and I have been so hesitant to sign on to that because I think this populist rhetoric is just that. It's just rhetoric. And it seems to me that this populism or this populist rhetoric, where you can have people who support Bernie get behind this populist rhetoric, but because there are no solutions or no clear directions as to how to solve these problems, those people can very well be swept up in the same populist rhetoric coming from somebody like Donald Trump. So I have been very hesitant to sign on to the idea that the left just needs to go populist, and that will be all problems solved. And I just don't think that is the case. I think populism turns the people against these institutions or a bigger bad guy, but oftentimes it's just aimless frustration. Instead of working towards these incremental changes that are actually going to have an effect on people's lives. Or looking at the Biden administration and how many bipartisan laws they were able to pass that are actually impacting people. It wasn't Biden that was glomming on to this populist rhetoric. It's Donald Trump. And he is very good at riling people up, getting them pissed off at the system, pissed off at the government or our institutions. But then when it comes to actually getting stuff done, it just seems like an aimless child throwing his fists around in the air. And that's pretty much where it stays. I mean, let's go ahead and take a look at that graph now about how fentanyl overdoses continue to climb even under Trump's watch.
That something for Trump is to get tough, to crack down and stop these other countries from humiliating us by flooding us with drugs. But again, there's a record to look at here, right? Trump campaigned on stopping the fentanyl crisis when he won in 2016, and he created a task force after he won. And as you can see on this chart, despite all the hardline politics and his tough talk and his best efforts, what happened? Oh, overdose deaths just kept going up on his watch. They plateaued a bit in 2018 and then skyrocketed. Almost as if promises are easier than results. But what's happening there in the end? It's actually going down for the first time. And this is the fundamental issue we face. The guy that we just elected is not interested in the difficult, serious things you have to do to fix stuff. But he was adept at channeling people's frustration, genuine and righteous, correct frustration and rage about things like 100,000 Americans dying of fentanyl every year, these big complex problems, and making them feel seen and agreeing with them that the system sucks. But that does not actually fix our problems or their problems. This is not what he's in it for.
So Donald Trump can scream till he's blue in the face about this issue or that issue, and he can rile up his base to be concerned about all of these different things. But I think we're probably about to see a second Trump administration that is not going to get anything done for the people, just like his first administration. And that's why I've been so hesitant to jump onto this populist rhetoric stuff and try to, organize behind a populist movement, because I just don't think it is productive. This populist rhetoric seems to be very aimless. It riles up people's frustrations and, gets them concerned about their pet issue. But then at the end of the day, it doesn't seem like anything gets done about it. And I just thought all of this was very interesting. Not only is it very good that the Biden administration is actually making progress in bringing these overdose deaths down, I think it's also very important to explore how we are going to move forward in the future. Is that populist rhetoric something that is going to be a tool for success? Or is it just going to be something like Donald Trump uses it for, to rile people up without any solid solutions about anything? So, just food for thought. Good on the Biden administration for actually putting in the work, actually working with China, trying to get these precursors out of here, trying to make sure that fentanyl isn't killing as many people. He's actually making progress on it, which is great. I know that millions upon millions of families have been impacted by this opioid epidemic. And so it is really great news that Biden is actually putting in the work to solve these issues. And I'm just afraid to see that any of this progress is going to stop, because Donald Trump is really good at pissing people off about these given issues. But when it comes time to deliver for the people, I'm afraid it's going to be a big fat donut hole. So I'll leave it there for now. If you guys got anything out of this video, please remember to smash that like button and subscribe. Maybe share it with a friend or two. I'd very much appreciate that. Like I said, I am trying to make it to 1,000 subscribers before the end of the year. I've got less than 200 to go, so I would very much appreciate your support. If you want to see how something like mass deportations could affect this country, something that Donald Trump has been very good at scaring people about or rattling people up about, go ahead and watch that video on the screen now. Otherwise, I'll see you guys on the next one.